So I've done a little bit of yoga, but I've not tried the downward cow. I think it's the downward dog, right? And also I wanted to point out that actually in the month of June, I'm going to participate inside a training program we've just started establishing in SAP called Search Inside Yourself. And it's getting exactly at the points you were making. I'm going to commit 4 afternoons of 4 hours at a stretch to get inside myself. It's going to be weird. Anyway, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Long-time Kenyan, but not so many occasions for me to speak, so I'm excited to be here sharing with you this sexy topic of manufacturing. It's such an awesome title for a talk. I thought most of you would leave the room at this stage, but anyhow. I'm going to avoid a couple of things. So I'm going to frame the conversation as, manufacturing is a huge component of our world, as we all know. Something like 16% of the world's workforce is basically inside manufacturing in some way, shape, or form. And over the next 10 years, we're going to see some profound changes. I mean, Vivek kind of touched on a whole plethora of them. Actually, I could sit down and we're almost done by your talk. But it's going to have massive ripple effects. And it's going to massively disrupt business models. It's going to massively disrupt ecosystems, supply chains end to end. And there's going to be an interesting question mark around education and then the role of government in how we govern the world going forward. Things like IP. How do you protect your IP when somebody can just pick up a 3D printer and print something out that you used to sell as a part or those kinds of things? I'm going to stay away from energy. I'm going to stay away from natural resource shortages and other kind of things like climate change. These are all going to have profound effects, and I'm not a subject matter expert on any of them, but I will talk about manufacturing. This is the future of the enterprise. This is what the future workforce looks like. It's basically one man and his dog. The man is there to feed the dog, but the dog's there to prevent the man from touching anything, right? Manufacturing, as we know it over the next decade, will continue on pace. Already for the last 40 years, it's been doing automation, mechanization, and dehumanization, right? We're getting people further and further away from harm. When you're talking about mining, oil and gas, and other kinds of industries, we're taking people out of those environments, which is actually generally a good thing. Now, of course, it raises a question about what's going to happen with the displaced workforce. And I actually believe positively that we're going to see an awful lot of these people leave the factories, leave the plants, and move more into a services economy, right? Where they actually do the last mile of manufacturing, where you create something locally and you assemble it locally, right? You're still going to have companies like Caterpillar that's in Peoria making the D11R bulldozer, $1 million bulldozer. This thing's amazing. I'm fascinated by this machine. Those kinds of companies, Boeing, Airbus, the CPG industries, they're all going to continue to do manufacturing pretty much the same way as they have. They're just going to automate the living daylights out of it and squeeze every penny of profit and every penny of inefficiency out, right? That's what they're going to promptly do. So, interestingly enough, I just wanted to show you this, because yesterday, Martin Yang deboned a chicken in 18 to 20 seconds. The machine, just to give you a sense of what happens in industry, this machine can debone chickens in 4 seconds, and it can do 110,000 chickens an hour, right? So that's the kind of scale. When I'm thinking about enterprise scale, industrial complex, that's the kind of machinery that's going into the world. And Vivek touched on a whole bunch of those examples. The one about Baxter. This is a phenomenal thing, right? So I'm a big tech geek guy, and a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last 22 years is about simplifying, taking away the complexity of programming computers and making it easier for people to do their work. So Baxter is $22,000. It basically requires no programming and can be decrated, opened up, and put into productive use within an hour. And then is trained by the people that used to do that repetitive task. And they just do it by physically interacting with the robot and showing them, this is how I did this is how I do this, and before you know it, basically, the human is now in charge of supervising lots of Baxters. Now, I kind of think that Baxter's eyes are a little creepy in this one. So I think he sees the future clearer, right? So here's another example. This is a phenomenal new 3D printer. What it actually does is it prints in air. So in real time, the robot will go down and create a 3D structure. Now, I had a video, but unfortunately it didn't integrate into the PowerPoint properly, so I took it out. But it's extraordinary to watch. And then it just frees your mind to start thinking about the possibilities. Here's another example, industrial scale CNC machine. What you're seeing here, the dog is actually taking a nap at the moment, but the man is watching the machine, okay? So it's a CNC machine. It has an X and a Y and a Z dimensions of 150 meters that way, 12 meters that way, and 4 meters this way. Now, in this particular instance, it's right-sized for the production of the casts required for making wind turbines that are 50 meters long. And the head of the machine itself can actually have different components added to it to do different kinds of work. So in some cases it's milling, in some cases it's polishing, in some cases they're actually going to make it such that it can lay down the fiberglass. So it not only will make the mold, it'll put down the fiberglass and everything will be done automated. You could print a house with this machine, or several houses. So I'm going to switch gears now because that's like classic heavy-duty manufacturing stuff. I want to shift where I see the most exciting and interesting things happening, which is in the last mile of manufacturing, right? Just in time, just in place, and just for me, right? So some of you have probably heard about WikiHouse. The founder of this basically was on TED recently, and I think it's a profound thing that's happening. And it's just one example of many things that are happening at the edges, where people are taking charge of their own destinies. They're taking the technologies that we now have that are freely available. The transaction costs are going to zero, and everybody has an opportunity to participate and bring out their own imagination. So what this is basically people with CNC machines. You can buy CNC machines now to put in your garage at a reasonable cost, a couple of $1,000s in some cases. Take standard 8x4 materials, plywood, that you buy at Home Depot or whatever, and they've open sourced the construction kit for basically putting a house together. So I'll just click through these. It ends up making a giant IKEA kit, without IKEA, of course. And within a day, basically 2 people or 3 people can basically assemble a house. And then the designs of the house are all open sourced. So this is taking the factory and making it everywhere, right? It's designed so that it takes standard materials like toilets and windows and doors and actually is customizable, so depending on the region that you live in the world, metric, imperial, all that kind of stuff, it'll basically dynamically change for those things, and then you can take local resources and put them to work. And this is another interesting development that's happening. I mean, you've all heard of things like the Maker movement and the Maker Fair. And like I said earlier, I mean, how many of you in this room own an HP printer at home in your house? I mean, most of you, I'm sure. Well, in the not too distant future here, you're going to have a 3D printer and a CNC machine and a bunch of other gadgets inside your house or inside your garage. And basically, when you buy products from Amazon, they won't actually ship you the product. They'll ship you the bits. And then the product will actually get produced inside your house, right? So atoms are turning to bits, and then bits are turning back into atoms. And I think you talked about Star Trek. I mean, this is the Star Trek replicator and teleportation machine of the future, and it's not the future anymore. It's actually here today. Now, what this is, with 100K garages, is it's a community movement. I mean, people have bought CNC machines, put them in their garages, and then if I'm within a mile or two or several miles away from somebody and I need something created, I can actually go onto this network, find a fabricator who's just in the local community and say, hey, can you print me out, take plywood and make me whatever, chair, table, whatever it might be. And this has all been done at the edges. There's no corporations, no central command and control anymore. It's all being done by communities. So I'm going to run this video quickly. Can we get the sound on this? Let me just go back and start this over. This is a really inspirational 2-minute video that I think is worth sharing with you all.
As humans, we've always strived to create, to build something that will solve a problem or meet one of our needs.
How would you feel if you could hold some of your designs in your hand and they went like that? That's impossible as well. Let's assume it is possible.
I'm not a designer, but now that I'm seeing the possibilities of this technology, you start to see the world differently, and you start to reimagine the objects around you.
People are taking the power of creation in their own hands.
Boom, open up your little small, pull out an idea and create it. Like that's what Shapeways does in a nutshell.
3D printing is a way of making things element by element additively. The things that we're designing, you can't make any other way.
I could make objects bigger, smaller, stranger. There's no limit to the variation you can apply.
And I suddenly realized how much I was restrained by a lot of the technologies that were around before.
When something new comes to this home, she asks, have you bought it or have you made it?
If you look around us, we can buy any product we need to do whatever we want. What's missing, however, is our personal input into those products.
We have an idea, and then in the mail, the idea comes sort of as an object, and that's never existed before.
As a designer, you can concentrate on making the best objects, the best product that you can, and Shapeways does the rest.
So we can make one of something and test it out. And all of this doesn't make any difference because there's no tooling, there's no molding.
There's no investment for designer. It means that they can innovate faster. There's a protein for innovation.
This gives rise to a whole new way of solving problems.
It's mind-blowing to think that we can build something today that was literally impossible yesterday.
Yeah, you can go on YouTube or you can go on Shapeways' website. So I had the opportunity to meet with the CEO of Shapeways not too long ago, and quite an extraordinary thing. The company's only about 5 to 6 years old. About 3 years ago, they were producing 7,000 unique printed items a month. 3 years fast forward, now they're printing 70,000 unique items a month. Right? They can print in 30 different types of material, and they just introduced printing in sterling silver, which has actually spurred the creation of a mass jewelry community. People are now going, creating jewelry, sending it to Shapeways, and getting the jewelry sent back. And in fact, actually this example here is another example. Bugaboo. I'm sure some of you have had a Bugaboo or needed a Bugaboo in your life. It has a design flaw. I know this has been videotaped. Huh?
No, it's a baby carriage.
It's a baby carriage, sorry. I thought everybody knew what a Bugaboo was. I guess when you have kids, that's what happens. The Bugaboo has a locking spring inside the central mechanism where you can basically make the chair go forwards or backwards, and the kid can either see where they're going or just trust you and think it's all going to work out. And it breaks. It's made of a substandard material, and when you're not careful with it, it'll snap. So this guy basically rang up Bugaboo and he basically said, oh, can you please ship me the replacement part for this locking pin? And they said, no. He says, what do you mean? He said, no, it's a sealed casing. We don't allow people to repair it, so you'll just have to go buy another Bugaboo. And they're over $1,000 for these damn things, right? So he said, screw that. Went to his garage, got a screwdriver, came in, popped it out, went to a free open source, freely available 3D design software like SketchUp, replicated the design, and then sent it to Shapeways. Shapeways sent it back to him, printed out in a metal that was better quality than the pin that was already in there, and he repaired his Bugaboo. But better still, because he did it once, it became available to everybody else. And Shapeways has a whole e-commerce infrastructure, so he now sells the locking pin to any other unfortunate parent that happens to have this problem. So he gets a commission, and Shapeways gets a commission, and everybody's happy. So these are the kinds of things that are happening. So you can go and it's a fascinating website. There's lots of other companies. I didn't want to pack too many companies in here for you to see. But that then takes me to so Shapeways is basically industrial scale, industrial quality 3D printing, right? Then we get to the MakerBot. I mean, everybody's heard of the MakerBot, right? It's about $2,200. It's an extraordinary machine. And by the way, Staples is now selling a $1,300 3D printer in the store. And there's a $500 3D printer. And the price just keeps plummeting. But I wanted to bring up this one because there's a couple of things that have happened recently that are just extraordinary, that just get you all goosebumps and stuff. This is the one example. It makes me, Sorry. This kid basically had a developmental issue in the womb. It's called amniotic bend syndrome, and his hand didn't develop. Now, a guy in Africa who's a carpenter basically had an accident at work, and he cut his fingers off. So he basically said to himself, on the day that he was in the emergency room, he was getting treated, he basically said, I have got to get myself back to having a full-blown hand. And he basically set out on this journey, and every person he spoke to told him he was nuts. It wasn't going to happen. It wasn't possible. And then he happened to be on the internet, and he discovered a guy in the United States that worked in the movie industry and made animatronic hands. So you basically put a human hand inside of another hand, and it would operate it. So then he started collaborating with this guy over 10,000 miles. The MakerBot company basically donated 2 printers, one to the guy in the US and one to the guy in South Africa, and got behind the program. And the result is that he basically created this hand. So it gets printed out on a MakerBot Replicator 2. It's open source, it's made available for everybody. And then he created a Facebook site, and all of a sudden, you know, parents with children with this problem, one of my friends actually has a kid that has this problem, started discovering it and connecting with him and going, oh my God, it's great that you fixed your fingers, but you actually could rehabilitate my kid. And the great thing about it is, you can send the bits over to the MakerBot, get them printed out cheaply and easily, and as the kid grows, all you do is you scale up the parts. And then they hand those smaller parts to the next kid that's behind them. And they're just going to keep on evolving this stuff. It's extraordinary. There's a great video. It's a 10-minute long video on YouTube. It makes you cry. It makes me cry anyhow. I'm just... This is another one. This was last week in CNN. It's an extraordinary story. And this really gets to the whole hyper-personalization that's now possible. And it ties in the medical, it ties in everything you said, Vivek, and other people that are here. This kid basically was 6 weeks old and was in a restaurant and ended up turning blue. And it turned out that the kid basically had a problem. Whenever it exhaled, its lungs collapsed. And the parents had to keep giving the kid CPR. So they took him to the emergency room, and they thought the kid would never leave the hospital. And the doctors basically didn't know what to do about it, because the kid was only 6 weeks old and the lungs collapsing. I mean, you understand this. So they said, let's go for a Hail Mary pass. So what they did was they took the CAT scans, they reverse engineered the CAT scans of the kid's lungs structure, turned it into a 3D model, and then created a special splint that would be able to be inserted to the kid's lungs that's exactly the dimensions of the kid's lungs, and make it of a material called PCL, polycarbon something or other thing, and it basically dissolves in the body over time. So as the kid grows and starts to develop the structures necessary to hold out their own lungs in place, the material will dissipate and be ejected from the body over a period of 3 years, and then the kid will basically be back to normal. So the story last Thursday basically hit. The kid's now reached 18 months and is doing extremely well. So then the next thing, this stuff is crazy. And I know Rob's super excited about this. Printed meat. I mean, can you believe it? I mean, printing meat and printing leather products. So it's Peter Thiel and others that are basically investing in this company. It's called Modern Meadows, or Modern Meadow. They are actually taking the similar kind of technologies that went into that child, you know, creating biological structures. They're basically using the same concepts to start thinking about how to print meat. So that means you don't kill cows, you don't kill other animals. You'll have to ask Rob about that. I have no details on it. So, I mean, this is phenomenal, right? Think about the massive disruption this is going to have. Positive. I mean, animals are not going to get slaughtered. You're going to be able to order a leather product and, you know, again, going back to my Amazon story, just ship the bits to my house and print the damn thing out in my garage and I'll pick it up in the morning, right? Supply chains. The whole infrastructure of the world is going to change because of these technologies. You know, you won't necessarily have to be transporting goods halfway around the planet anymore, increasing your carbon footprint and so on and so forth. So I mean, to me, it really boils down to three things. I mean, the takeaway from what I'm saying here, or at least I hope you'll take away, is that manufacturing is being radically democratized, right? It's being decentralized, so it's everywhere and available cheaply to the world. And then it's hyper-personalized. Just in time, just in place, and just for me. So thank you very much. That's how you can contact.
Thanks, Dennis.
I have a giant website called SAP.com. You can go there and check that out.